I'm William, 38, and for the last 12 years I've been called a lot of things by my family. Some said I was selfish for moving out so young. Others whispered I was cold for distancing myself from everyone. But no one ever said I was a bad father. Not until last weekend. If you had asked me 10 years ago what kind of relationship I had with my family, I would have said strained, but functional. There were always undercurrents, snide comments, backhanded compliments, selective invitations. But I let a lot of it go. My dad used to say, family isn't about keeping score. So I didn't. I just lived my life, tried to be civil, and kept to myself after a certain point. I figured I owed them space, not explanations. But when Dad passed 2 years ago, things started shifting. See, my father was the only person in the family who truly respected my boundaries. He wasn't warm, but he was decent, practical. When he died, something broke in the structure of our family. Whatever tiny balance we had collapsed under the weight of years of unspoken tension. My sister, Michelle, was the first to step into the vacuum. Michelle is the type of person who pretends to be the glue of the family while quietly pocketing the scissors. Growing up, she always managed to play both victim and hero, telling our mom that I'd skipped dinner because I was depressed again, while simultaneously complaining to our cousins that I was a moody brat who didn't care about family traditions. I learned quickly that trying to explain myself only made things worse. She twisted words like a magician with a deck of cards. It wasn't worth the fight. After Dad's funeral, she made it clear she expected to take charge of family matters now. It was subtle at first. She started hosting dinners, choosing venues for holidays, planning get-togethers on everyone's behalf. No one asked her to, but she did it anyway. Most of our relatives, especially the ones who lived nearby, were content to nod along. It was easier than disagreeing. And me? I stayed out of it. I had my wife, Clara, and our 2 boys, Sam and Eli. We lived about an hour away, and between school runs, soccer practice, and managing my real estate projects, I didn't exactly have time to drive in for every Sunday pot roast. That became a problem. Michelle started making little digs in the family group chat. Oh, we'll miss you again, William, or guess family doesn't mean the same thing to everyone. I ignored most of it. Clara told me to block her. I didn't. I wanted to believe maybe this was grief talking. That Michelle was struggling to cope with Dad being gone and trying to fill his shoes in the only way she knew how. But last year, at Thanksgiving, things escalated. It was the first time in a while we'd all been under the same roof. Clara and I brought a pumpkin pie, and the boys were excited to see their cousins. Within 10 minutes of walking through the door, Michelle loudly asked Clara, "So, do you ever get tired of being married to someone so emotionally unavailable?" Everyone laughed like it was a harmless joke. I forced a smile, but it stung. Later that night, while we were packing up to leave, Michelle pulled me aside and said, "Just so you know, if Dad could see how you've pulled away from the family, he'd be disappointed." I didn't respond. I just walked out. That was the night I started pulling even further back. But the real breaking point came last weekend. It was supposed to be a simple memorial, a small backyard gathering at my parents' house to mark the 2nd anniversary of Dad's passing. Michelle insisted on hosting. I didn't want to go, but something in me said I should. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was the memory of how my father always made an effort to include me, even when others didn't. Maybe I just wanted to show the boys that we still show up, even when it's uncomfortable. Clara didn't come. She had a conference to attend, but I brought Sam and Eli. They were dressed nicely, polite, quiet. Sam even brought the little wooden chest set Dad had given him a year before he passed. I hadn't told anyone, but I was planning to hand Michelle an envelope during the gathering, something I'd been sitting on for weeks. It was the deed transfer. Before he passed, Dad told me he wanted me to oversee the property. Not because he favored me, but because, in his words, "You're the only one who'll treat it like more than just a piece of land." The house wasn't glamorous, but it had value. A lot of value, actually. I'd been managing the legal side of things quietly, paying off the final bits of the mortgage, dealing with county records, waiting until the right time to make the transfer official. The plan was to sign it over to the family trust. Equal shares. No drama. No favoritism. It was my way of keeping Dad's legacy intact, of showing I cared, of doing the right thing, even if it wasn't acknowledged. But then, Michelle opened her mouth. It happened right after lunch. The kids were sitting on the grass, playing with the chess set. I was standing near the patio table, chatting with our Uncle John and Aunt Marie. That's when Michelle walked over with a glass of white wine, looked down at Sam and Eli, and said, loud enough for half the yard to hear, "They're pity cases growing up with a father like you." I blinked. At first, I wasn't sure I heard her right, but then I noticed the way she tilted her head toward me, smiling, like she wanted me to say something, to make a scene, to crack. And what broke me, what really got under my skin, was that a few people actually nodded. Not loudly, not overtly, just a little bob of the head, like they agreed, like they'd always agreed. I didn't say a word. I walked over to the table where I'd set down the envelope. It was thick, legal documents, notarized forms, all neatly prepared. I slid it toward Michelle. She raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" "Doesn't matter," I said and walked out. I didn't even say goodbye. The boys followed me silently. We got in the car. I didn't speak on the drive home, and neither did they. Sam kept glancing at me, and Eli held the chessboard in his lap like it was something fragile that might break if he shifted too much. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Clara got back late and found me in the living room with a glass of water I hadn't touched. When I told her what happened, she didn't say anything, just took my hand and squeezed it. The next morning, I made a phone call, then another, and by noon, the deed transfer had been formally canceled. What most of my relatives didn't know was that the house wasn't just sentimental, it was collateral. Without it, the family trust couldn't secure the loan they were counting on to renovate Michelle's dream project, a boutique event space she'd been planning on converting from the backyard guest house. And just like that, they were in serious trouble. The fallout didn't happen immediately. That's the funny thing about families like mine. Most people don't blow up. They simmer. They let things fester under layers of performative politeness until something snaps. And while I'd hoped, naively, that my quiet exit from the anniversary party would speak for itself, I underestimated just how deep the entitlement ran. The morning after the party, I canceled the deed transfer. My lawyer was efficient and didn't ask many questions. Just a "are you sure?" and a slight pause when I said yes. The house remained in my name. The trust, which Michelle and my cousins had been waiting on to access capital for their grand backyard event space conversion, hit a wall. Still, I heard nothing for 3 days. No calls, no texts, no guilt-tripping group chat messages. Not even a passive-aggressive meme from Michelle, which had become her preferred way of expressing disdain when words wouldn't suffice. Then the silence cracked. On Thursday afternoon, I was picking up Eli from school when Clara called, her voice tight and clipped. "Did you see what Michelle just posted?" "No." I pulled over, heart beginning to thud. "Go check Facebook." I opened the app and saw the post immediately. Michelle had shared an old photo of our dad in front of the family house, smiling, holding a cup of coffee, the morning sun casting long shadows across the porch. The caption underneath was short. "Some people say they honor their father. Others just hoard what he left behind. Hashtag legacy, hashtag family first, hashtag shameful." The comments were what you'd expect. A chorus of agreement from relatives, family friends, and the kinds of people who think cryptic posts count as moral crusades. "Some people only show up when it benefits them," someone commented. "You're the real backbone of that family, Michelle," another chimed in. And then this one. "Maybe your brother needs reminding of what family really means." That stung. Not because of the post itself, not because of the cheap hashtags or the public martyr act, but because I could see Sam's old third-grade teacher in the comments, and one of Clara's clients, and even a woman I barely knew from our old neighborhood. People were watching, judging, accepting Michelle's narrative without hesitation, and I did nothing to correct it. That night, I sat at the dinner table with my boys and stared blankly at my food while Sam picked at his mashed potatoes. "Dad," he asked, "why does Aunt Michelle think you're a bad person?" I looked up. Clara froze mid-bite. "She doesn't," I said carefully. She doesn't understand some things. And sometimes, when people don't understand something, they make up their own story." Sam frowned. "But she said we're pity cases." I couldn't answer. Not properly. Not without unpacking a history of jealousy, manipulation, and quiet cruelty that spanned decades. So instead, I said the only thing I could. "You're not." The next few weeks blurred together. Michelle didn't back down. In fact, she doubled down. The group chat became a battlefield, though she never addressed me directly. Everything was passive, indirect, laced with just enough deniability that it would have sounded petty to call it out. We're planning a family cookout next month. Can someone bring folding chairs? William probably won't be attending again, but we'll save him a plate he won't pick up anyway. That kind of thing. Most of our relatives either laughed or stayed quiet. A few defended me privately. My cousin Daniel sent a message that just said, "I get it, man. I do." But no one said anything publicly. No one ever does. Then came the breaking point. It was a Saturday afternoon when Michelle showed up at my house unannounced. Clara and I were cleaning out the garage while the boys played with sidewalk chalk on the driveway. I didn't hear her car. I just heard the slam of a door and then her heels clicking up the path like a metronome of bad decisions. She didn't knock. She walked right up to the garage and said, "We need to talk." Clara stepped between us. "You should leave, Michelle." But Michelle ignored her. She turned to me and said, "You humiliated me. You embarrassed this entire family. And you're dragging Dad's memory through the mud because of your ego." I stood slowly, wiping my hands on an old towel. "I didn't embarrass anyone. You did that when you insulted my children in front of a crowd of people who said nothing. They're kids. They didn't even understand it. They understood enough to ask me why their aunt thinks their father is shameful." Her face shifted then. Something cracked. Not regret, something worse. A realization that her words had consequences, and not the kind she could control. "You think you're better than everyone just because you have a few rental properties and some money in the bank," she snapped. "Dad always pitied you. That's why he gave you the paperwork. Because he knew you couldn't handle real family responsibility." I laughed. "I didn't mean to. It just came out." "You think he pitied me?" "He asked me to handle it because I was the only one who wouldn't sell the house for parts." Michelle's voice dropped to a low, sharp whisper. "You don't deserve that house." "And you do?" I asked. "What would you even do with it, Michelle?" Her mouth twitched. That was the tell. The lie was coming. "I'd keep it in the family," she said. "Exactly like Dad would have wanted. And charge the family $4,000 to rent the backyard for weddings?" I said quietly. She blinked. "Once. Twice. How did you?" "Don't worry about it." I cut her off. "You need to leave." Michelle's jaw clenched. She didn't move. Clara stepped forward again, more firmly this time. "Get off our property." Eventually, she turned and left. But not before muttering, "You'll regret this. You think you've won, but you haven't even started losing yet." I watched her drive off and felt something cold settle in my chest. It would have been easy to write it off, to tell myself it was just another tantrum. But something about her tone, something about the way she said it, told me this wasn't over. I was right. 2 weeks later, the betrayal came. It was a Wednesday. I was on my lunch break when Clara called, her voice tight again. Did you tell the school we were moving?" "What?" I frowned. "No." "What?" "The boys' school just called. They said they received paperwork, signed paperwork, requesting a transfer. Someone submitted forms under your name." I froze. "That's impossible." "I told them it wasn't from us," Clara said. "They're holding everything until you can go in." "But, will the address on the form?" "It's Michelle's." I drove straight to the school with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight I could feel my knuckles ache. The office staff showed me the forms. Someone had forged my signature, clumsily, but just enough to maybe pass if no one was paying attention. The address listed was Michelle's house. And under reason for transfer, it simply said, change in guardianship. I walked out of that school with my stomach twisted into knots. The next day, a child welfare officer showed up at our door. Apparently, an anonymous report had been made alleging that I was mentally unfit, isolating my children from extended family, and neglecting their social development. The report mentioned the chess set, said it was a concerning obsession with isolating play. The report referenced photos from the anniversary party, ones I didn't even know existed, of the boys sitting alone while the other kids played in the pool. It was meticulous, calculated, and I knew exactly who had filed it. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room again, the same spot I'd been in after the anniversary party, and stared at the fireplace. Clara sat across from me, arms folded tight across her chest. "She's trying to ruin us," she whispered. I nodded. "I'm not going to let her." Because that was the moment. The moment I stopped playing nice. The moment I realized silence wasn't strength, it was surrender. That every time I let Michelle twist the truth, every time I let her manipulate people behind the scenes, I was giving her more room to destroy what little peace I had left. That was the night I stopped trying to keep the peace and started planning. It's hard to describe what it feels like when your own sister tries to legally claim your children. At first, I didn't even fully register it. I went through the motions, met with the school principal, gave a statement to the social worker, called my lawyer. I even took the boys out for ice cream after, trying to pretend everything was normal. But deep down, something inside me cracked. I wasn't scared. I was exhausted. There's a difference. Michelle hadn't just crossed a line. She'd redrawn the whole map. Up until then, every insult, every cold shoulder, every calculated jab at my parenting or distance from the family had still lived within some unspoken boundary of dysfunction. But this was an invasion. It was a declaration of war. And I was losing. Within days, whispers started reaching me. Clara overheard some parents at school talking about concerns regarding our household. One of my tenants forwarded me an anonymous letter they received, accusing me of financial fraud and threatening to expose me if they didn't vacate the property. Another letter went to my business partner, an unsigned envelope containing screenshots of Michelle's Facebook posts, a few pulled quotes about me being emotionally unstable, and a grainy photo of me sitting alone at the anniversary party with a caption that read, "Would you trust this man with your kids?" The damage wasn't public, not yet, but it was corrosive, quiet, deliberate. I kept telling myself to stay calm, to think logically. But the truth was, I was spiraling. I started sleeping on the couch, not because Clara and I were fighting. She was my anchor through all of this, but because I couldn't bear the idea of lying in bed while she stayed awake worrying beside me. At least on the couch, I could pretend I was protecting her from something. Sam and Eli noticed. Kids always do. They didn't ask questions, but their energy changed. They were quieter, more cautious. Sam stopped asking about sleepovers at his cousin's house. Eli started bringing his backpack to the kitchen every night, just in case, though he never said what "in case" meant. That crushed me more than anything. At one point, I genuinely wondered if Michelle would get away with it. If she'd wear me down just enough to force a custody hearing. If her version of the truth, repeated often and loudly enough, would start to seem plausible. That's how people like her operate. They don't win because they're right. They win because they never stop talking. I remember the exact moment I hit bottom. It was 2 weeks after the school incident. I had just come out of a meeting with a longtime client who politely, but firmly, told me they'd be postponing our renovation plans until next quarter. I knew what that meant. They didn't want to be associated with the drama. I got back to my truck, sat behind the wheel, and just sat there. Engine off, hands still on my keys, breathing shallow. And I cried. Not loud, not theatrical, just silent tears down my face while I stared at the glove box. I felt like I was shrinking. Like every version of myself I'd spent the last 15 years building. Husband, father, businessman, stable man who stayed out of drama, was dissolving in real time. That was the fall. But in hindsight, it was also the start of the rise. Because something shifted after that breakdown. Maybe it was because I had nothing left to lose. Maybe it was the hollow kind of peace that comes after total devastation. But the very next day, I woke up before sunrise, made myself a cup of coffee, and opened a blank document on my laptop. I titled it Operation Rebuild. It wasn't a plan. Not at first. It was more like a brain dump. I wrote down everything Michelle had done in the past 5 years. Every documented insult. Every financial entanglement. Every business favor I had extended to her. Every voicemail. Every text. Every email I could dig up. By the end of the week, I had a 47-page dossier. My lawyer called it overkill. I called it insurance. But I didn't stop there. Next, I went through my rental properties. I tightened contracts, reassessed tenants, quietly offloaded the 2 underperforming units, and reinvested the profits into a commercial co-working space that had just opened across town. I took meetings. I made new connections. And for the first time in months, I felt like I was making decisions from a place of power again, not panic. Clara noticed the change before I did. "You're sleeping better," she said one morning while we made breakfast. "Am I?" She nodded. "And your voice is back." That made me pause. My voice. "You used to sound tired all the time, even when you weren't saying anything." I didn't realize how much weight I'd been dragging around. But it was true. I felt lighter. Not healed, not yet, but sharper, focused. And I wasn't the only one who noticed. Michelle, for all her theatrics, had grown used to me being silent. Me walking away. Me refusing to engage. So when I started showing up again, calm, polite, but present, she didn't know what to do with it. At a cousin's baby shower, I arrived right on time, shook hands with every relative in the room, and spent the entire afternoon talking to people Michelle had subtly turned against me. I didn't bring up the drama. I didn't even bring up the house. I just existed. Happily. Fully. Without shame. One uncle, a guy named Phil who'd always been neutral at best, pulled me aside toward the end and said, "You seem different lately. Like you got something figured out." I smiled. Maybe I finally stopped letting other people tell my story. That stuck with him. I could tell. And that's when I realized something important. Michelle's greatest weapon wasn't her manipulation. It was her monopoly on the narrative. She got to control the story because I refused to tell mine. So I started telling it. In small ways at first. Quietly. A lunch here, a phone call there. I reconnected with cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. I invited them to our home. Let them see for themselves who Clara and the boys were. What our life looked like. I didn't defend myself. I just let the truth speak. And it worked. People didn't change sides overnight. But the cracks appeared. The nods at Michelle's passive-aggressive comments grew fewer. The laughter less hearty. One cousin even asked her point-blank at a gathering, "Hey, what had happened with the house deed thing?" Michelle brushed it off. Old drama. William's sensitive. But I saw the flicker in her eyes. The first real panic. Because for the first time, I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was rebuilding. Not just my reputation, but my standing, my foundation, my self-worth. And then came the moment that solidified it all. The boys had been invited to a weekend soccer tournament. One of the dads, a guy named Marco, was a local contractor I'd worked with once or twice. After the match, we were chatting about schedules and school drop-offs when he said, "Hey, weird question. Your sister, Michelle, right?" I braced myself. "Yeah. She came into my office a few weeks ago. Asked if we'd partner on some backyard wedding venue project. Said she had access to a great property." Sounded vague. I nodded. "Yeah, that sounds about right." "Well, she name-dropped you. Said you were helping fund it." I blinked. "I'm not. Didn't think so." He shrugged. "Just figured you should know." And that's when it clicked. Michelle's plan hadn't just been to ruin me personally. She had been using my name, my credibility, my network, to build her own empire in the shadows. She wasn't just trying to take from me. She was trying to replace me. I stood on the edge of that soccer field, watching Eli laugh with his teammates, and made a silent promise. She could lie. She could smear. She could twist stories and forge documents and manipulate half the family into thinking I was some cold-hearted shell of a man. But she would never be me. And very soon, she would learn the cost of forgetting that. Because the rise was no longer quiet. It was beginning to make noise. There's a moment when you've been backed into a corner long enough that something inside you changes. At first, it's subtle, a flicker of awareness, a snap of a string that once kept you docile. But once it happens, it doesn't unhappen. And the moment Marco told me Michelle had been using my name to pitch her backyard event venue, that was it. That was the moment I stopped waiting for karma. I decided to be it. I didn't rush. That's not how you deal with people like Michelle. You don't scream. You don't throw tantrums. That's her playbook. No, you move in silence. You gather your cards. You watch her bet everything on a hand she thinks you can't see. Then, right when she's ready to cash out, you show her she's been bluffing the whole time. That Sunday night, I stayed up well past midnight in my office. Clara brought me tea and kissed the top of my head, didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. She knew what was happening. The storm wasn't coming. I was the storm. I opened 3 tabs. Tab 1, the county clerk's site. I confirmed again that the deed transfer was canceled. The house was still legally in my name. Untouchable. Still fully owned, not encumbered. Michelle had no legal claim to it, just a false sense of entitlement. Tab 2, my lawyer's secure portal. I uploaded every piece of documentation I'd collected so far. Screenshots of Michelle's posts using my name, the false school transfer form, the report filed with Child Services. We began a quiet but steady case file of defamation and attempted custodial interference. It was stronger than I expected once we laid it all out. Tab 3, a spreadsheet. I titled it Payouts. This wasn't about money, but Michelle made the mistake of operating like it was. That gave me an opening, a very useful one. The next week, I started quietly contacting the people I knew she had approached for her venue launch. I didn't accuse her. I just asked simple, calm questions. "Hey, just curious, did Michelle mention how the property was being handled legally?" Has she shown you a deed or agreement in writing? Did she say I was personally backing this project? The reactions were fascinating. Some people got defensive. Others were clearly suspicious already. A few, like Marco, admitted they'd been hesitant but didn't want to rock the boat. I told them all the same thing. No drama. Just want to make sure there are no misunderstandings. You'll want to do your due diligence. Meanwhile, I started reaching out to some of my old real estate contacts. People I hadn't done business with in years, but who still owed me favors. I floated the idea of selling the house outright. Not because I wanted to, because I might want to. Just enough for word to spread through the grapevine that the house was no longer secure. Within 2 weeks, Michelle was panicking. She didn't call me. That's not her style. She went around me. First to my mother, who, to her credit, actually called and asked me first. William, she said gently, Michelle's saying you're going to sell the house. Is that true? I sipped my coffee. Maybe. You know how much it means to her. I cut in. She's building a business behind my back using my name. I've already had to clean up the mess with 3 contractors. She forged my signature to move my children into her custody. Forgive me for not losing sleep over her event space. There was a long silence. You've changed, Mom said quietly. No, I replied. You just finally noticed. Next came the cousins. I started getting texts. Hey, not trying to get involved, but Michelle's freaking out about the deed. Just between us, she's saying you're holding the family hostage. Is there anything I can do to help? That last one came from Daniel, the same cousin who had privately texted me months ago with a simple, I get it. I invited him to lunch. We hadn't sat down one-on-one in years. Not because we didn't like each other, just life. But that day, over sandwiches and iced tea, something shifted. She's been playing this long game since your dad passed, Daniel said, stirring his drink. Acting like she's in charge of everything. It worked at first because no one wanted the responsibility. But now, people are starting to wake up. I leaned back. How bad is it? He shrugged. Let's just say, you have more quiet allies than you think. She's alienated a lot of people trying to build her little empire. I think most of us were just waiting for someone to push back. That's when I asked the question I'd been waiting to ask. Would you help me set up something? His eyebrows raised. Not revenge, I added quickly. Something better. I want to throw a party. He blinked. Like a real party? I nodded. At the house. Daniel grinned slowly. Now that's poetic. See, Michelle had spent the last year telling everyone that she was converting the backyard into a luxury event space. She'd bragged about it at every family gathering, even gave out tentative rates. She said it would be open by summer. She even posted mood boards on Pinterest. What she didn't realize was that, legally, she had no access to the property. And since I had quietly paid off the remaining mortgage, there were no bank claims either. It was mine. Fully. Wholly. And I was about to remind her, and everyone else, who actually held the keys. The plan was simple, a spring barbecue. Nothing formal. Just family and friends. Food. Music. A few local vendors I knew. And a guest list that included every person Michelle had tried to woo for her venue. Contractors. Planners. Florists. A couple of minor influencers who'd followed her page and assumed she was legitimate. Clara helped me design the invites. I had them printed on thick, professional cardstock with a simple heading. A day at the house, in memory of Dad. Hosted by William. No mention of Michelle. No digs. Just truth. We mailed them out. No eveets. No social media posts. Physical invites only, because we knew that would drive Michelle insane. She lived for online attention. A quiet, elegant party she wasn't included in would be like oxygen deprivation. She found out 2 weeks before the date. I know this because Daniel texted me. Michelle just asked if I was going to your weird little pity party. I told him to smile and say, wouldn't miss it. The week before the party, Michelle finally broke her silence. She showed up at my office. No appointment. Just walked in wearing sunglasses and an attitude. My assistant buzzed me. William, your sister's here. Should I send her in? I said. She sat across from my desk like she was a client, crossed her legs, and folded her arms. I'm going to be very clear, she said. Cancel the party. I looked her dead in the eye. No. She leaned forward. You're doing this to spite me. Everyone knows it. You're weaponizing the house. I almost laughed. You mean the house you tried to use to build a business under false pretenses? The house you told vendors I was backing? That house. She stood abruptly. You think this makes you look strong? It makes you look petty. No one is on your side. Then why are you here? She didn't answer. Instead, she said, if you go through with this, you'll regret it. I smiled. I already don't. And with that, she stormed out. The rest of the week was electric. Vendors started reaching out, curious, intrigued, some apologetic for previous assumptions. I welcomed them all with grace. I even hired a local band Michelle had tried to book months ago, but couldn't afford. The day before the event, I walked through the house alone. Every room held a memory. The bedroom where I'd hidden after my first heartbreak. The hallway where Dad used to leave notes for us taped to the wall. The kitchen where he made awful pancakes every Sunday morning. I thought about what he would say if he were here. And I heard his voice in my head, steady and firm. Make them remember who you are. So I did. The party was set to begin at 1 p.m. on Saturday. By 12:30, the driveway was full. By 1:15, the backyard was buzzing with conversation, laughter, music. People milled around, commenting on the setup, the view, the warmth of it all. Several guests approached me to say, "This is exactly how your dad would have wanted the house used." And then, at 2:03 p.m., Michelle arrived. She wasn't on the guest list. She didn't have an invite. But she showed up anyway, wearing heels that sank into the lawn and sunglasses she didn't take off. She didn't say a word to me, but she stood just outside the main patio area, watching, fuming, realizing, finally, that the empire she tried to build had been constructed on sand. And I was the tide. But the real checkmate hadn't happened yet, because what Michelle didn't know was that every guest had been handed a small pamphlet upon entry. Inside was a short note from me, a few photos of my father, and, on the final page, a scanned copy of the house deed, dated, notarized, and marked sole legal owner, William D. Linton. And beneath it, the property is not for sale, lease, or commercial use. Any business proposal involving this home not approved in writing by the owner is fraudulent and unauthorized. Simple, clean, public. I didn't accuse. I didn't humiliate. I just told the truth. And now, everyone else knew it too. Michelle didn't stay long. She left without speaking. But I saw her pause at the gate, shoulders stiff, hands trembling just slightly. The morning after the party, I woke up to silence. The kind of silence that doesn't hum with tension or anxiety, but finality. Clara was already in the kitchen making coffee. The boys were still asleep. For the first time in months, I wasn't waking up to dread. No half-formed plans rattling around my head. No new smear campaign to counter. Just clarity. The party had been a turning point. But it wasn't the revenge. That came next. Michelle had made one fatal mistake in all her schemes. She got comfortable. She thought my silence was surrender, not strategy. So she kept everything. The forged paperwork, the emails to contractors, the promises she made using my name. She left breadcrumbs everywhere. I simply picked them up. A week after the event, I met with my lawyer and handed over the final batch of documents. Together, we prepared a cease and desist order addressed to Michelle. Nothing aggressive, just firm and airtight. It laid out the legal reality of her actions. Unauthorized use of property, false advertising, impersonation, and attempted custodial interference. We served it the following Monday. She received it at home, and from what I heard through the grapevine, she lost it. I wasn't there, but Daniel told me she called him in a panic, demanding to know if I was really doing this. He said he told her he already did it. And then the fallout began. First domino, her online presence. Michelle had built a social media page over the past year advertising her venue. It was mostly aspirational, rendered sketches, decor samples, pictures of backyard angles taken at flattering hours. She'd even listed upcoming availability dates and asked for inquiries through a form. But now that the truth was out, people started asking questions. Innocent ones, mostly. Hey, I heard William owns the property. Is this in partnership with him? I attended a memorial at the house and didn't see any signs of renovations. Are you launching soon? Is there a license number I can verify for the venue? Within a few days, the page went private. Then it vanished altogether. Second domino, the contractor circle. The vendors she'd pitched, the ones she promised future partnerships, big payouts, joint business ventures, they all pulled back. Not because I told them to. I didn't have to. She had misrepresented the entire thing, and now the stink of that was hard to shake. One of the more prominent ones, a guy named Theo, even called me personally. I don't want to be involved in drama, he said. But I just want to thank you for the heads up. She promised a lot. Good thing I hadn't signed anything yet. Good thing indeed. Third domino, the family. This one fell the slowest, but when it hit, it cracked. Michelle had spent years painting herself as the glue of the family. The organizer. The caretaker. The one who stepped up when Dad passed. But now people started revisiting the past with new eyes. Cousin Amy reached out and admitted Michelle had guilt-tripped her into loaning money during the venue renovation, promising repayment once the business launched. She was out $3,000. Uncle John confessed Michelle told him I'd abandoned the house entirely and that she was taking it over to preserve Dad's legacy. Even Mom, slowly, carefully, began to peel back the curtain. She's been telling me for months that you weren't involved, she said over lunch one day. That you were planning to sell the house to some developer and move on with your life. I shook my head. And you believed her? She looked down. I wanted to. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. The disappointment in her face was punishment enough for both of us. The truth had arrived. Quietly. Completely. And with it, Michelle's credibility crumbled. But I wasn't done. Because while the public unraveling was satisfying, it still didn't address the personal betrayal. The forged school documents. The fake guardianship request. The anonymous report to child services. Those weren't petty shots. Those were nuclear. So I filed the report. My lawyer helped me draft a formal complaint to the county office outlining the forged documents and fraudulent custody attempt. We attached every copy, every timestamp, every email. And while I wasn't pressing criminal charges yet, it created a permanent paper trail. The case was closed with a warning. But that warning went on her record. From there, I reached out to the school district. Same thing. Quietly. Methodically. I explained what had happened, provided proof, and ensured they flagged any future activity involving my children that wasn't signed directly by me or Clara. They were understanding. Apologetic, even. By now, Michelle was isolated. Her online project was gone. Her contractors ghosted her. Her reputation with the family was bruised. But the final blow came from the one place she never expected. Her job. Michelle worked in PR for a mid-sized marketing firm. Reputation was everything. And while I never contacted them directly, one of her co-workers happened to attend the party, someone she didn't know I was connected to. She'd been name-dropping me at work, talking about her real estate portfolio and how she was co-managing the estate property for commercial development. After the party, her co-worker realized she'd been lying. Word spread. Quietly. Internally. But in a company built on image and credibility, that's a death sentence. She wasn't fired, not exactly. But 3 months later, I heard through Daniel that she'd been let go during restructuring. No position replaced her. No announcement. Just gone. And that was the final domino. Months passed. The dust settled. We kept living. The boys started smiling again. Clara and I took a weekend trip without fear of what we'd come home to. The group chat grew quieter, less chaotic. And one by one, family members began to reach out, not out of obligation, but sincerity. As for Michelle, she went quiet. No more cryptic posts. No more Facebook martyrdom. Her silence spoke volumes. She hadn't apologized, of course. That wasn't in her nature. But the message was clear. She lost. And not because I outshouted her. Because I outlasted her. Because when you spend your whole life pretending to be the storm, you never expect to drown in someone else's calm. I kept the house. Not out of spite, but principle. I renovated it. Not into a venue, but into something better, a shared family space. A place the boys could grow up visiting, where we could host real gatherings, not power plays. Sometimes I sit on the porch with a coffee and look out over the yard where my kids now play, and I think about how close I came to giving it all up, to letting her twist the truth until even I questioned it. But I didn't. And now? Now she lives with the echo of her own schemes, the weight of a legacy she tried to hijack, and the knowledge that the only person she ever failed to beat was the one she underestimated most. Because the quiet ones, we don't bark. We wait. And when we bite, we don't miss.